They laughed when she lit candles in the battlefield's ashes. They called her delusional, a heretic, a ghost chaser. But when they saw what answered her prayer, they stopped laughing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first time they saw her, she was kneeling in a crater still warm from the blast. Her hands were bloody. Her head was bowed, and her lips moved in a language no one spoke anymore. The others mocked. "Hey, priestess of nothing," someone shouted. "Ask your imaginary god to clean up this mess." They kicked rubble toward her, spitting the names of dead cities. But she didn't move. Not even when a boot crunched beside her head. Not even when the war-hardened lieutenant pulled her up by the collar. Name, tribe, allegiance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her eyes rose slowly, twin embers in a dust-blackened face. "My name is Kala, my tribe is Ash, my allegiance is to Kalgor." The silence was instant, and then the laughter came louder than before. Kalgor, the war god, that old myth the mountain people used to chant about. You might as well pray to the wind. Kala said nothing. She was 16, slight and barefoot. The rag around her waist was barely holding together, and yet, she had survived 5 bombings, a siege, and a campfire execution. The soldiers didn't know what to do with her. She didn't eat, she didn't cry, she didn't beg. Instead she etched symbols into stone with a rusted nail. She whispered to the skies at night, and once, she stood in the rain for hours with her arms lifted to the thunder. They called her cursed. Some said she was a spy, others, a witch, but no one could explain why the sniper that aimed at her accidentally shot himself, or how the convoy she refused to enter exploded minutes after it departed, or why wolves followed her at night, never attacking, only watching. Captain Merrick ordered her transported to Base 6 for interrogation. The transport never arrived. The road was found torn open like something had clawed up from beneath. And in the middle stood Kala, untouched, hands dripping in oil and fire. Merrick was furious. "You think you're some holy child, that you can bring back forgotten gods?" Kala answered softly, "They're not forgotten. You just stopped fearing them." That night the camp shook, not from artillery, from the sound of metal clashing with metal, far too close. Weapons jammed, radios died, and shadows moved through the tents with eyes like embers. Kala stood in the center of it all, eyes closed, mouth moving, as if in deep ancient prayer. The survivors would later describe hearing drums from the mountains, and footsteps too heavy to be human, and a voice that rumbled, "My priestess has been mocked long enough." By dawn half the camp was gone. The ground was scorched in perfect spirals. No bodies were found. Only one thing remained, a sigil carved deep into the soil, a sword wreathed in flame, pointing downward. The same symbol Kala had drawn 100 times before, and as she walked alone from the ruins, barefoot and blood-smeared, not a single soul dared to laugh, not anymore. The survivors tried to forget. They said it was an accident, that the fuel dump had exploded, that maybe the girl tampered with equipment, but Merrick knew better. He had seen things that weren't supposed to exist, shadows shaped like armor, a flame that bent around her body but never touched her skin. He watched the footage frame by frame. There was a figure standing behind Kala during the explosion, too large to be human. Its eyes glowed like furnace coals, and when the flame surged, it raised a sword made of smoke. The footage corrupted seconds later. Merrick ordered it deleted, but not before copying it to a private drive. Kala, meanwhile, kept walking. No food, no water, no map, only a direction east, toward the ruins of Kedir, Noro, the last city that had defied the empire and been buried under stone and silence. She walked past ruins, past burned villages where bones still lay in doorways. She walked past soldiers too frightened to approach her. They whispered legends behind her back. They called her the Fireborn, the last voice of Kalgor, and in some places, the Doom Girl. But she didn't stop walking, even when her feet bled, even when the sky split with lightning that followed her like a hunting bird. Some nights, she didn't sleep. Instead she knelt, and the wind carried strange chants, words that hadn't been spoken in centuries. In the imperial capital, the high command took notice. They reviewed the camp incident with growing unease. "There is no god of war," General Voss spat. "Only superstition and fear." But even Voss hesitated when the report arrived from Outpost Delta. 20 elite soldiers had gone missing after chasing a barefoot girl. No signs of struggle, only their weapons left behind. Each melted into the earth. A council was convened, and the verdict was brutal. Kill the girl, bury the myth, restore order. They assigned Operative Lennox, a tracker who never failed. Cold, precise, efficient. He laughed when he saw her file. "She's just a girl with a dirt colt," he muttered. "She bleeds like anyone else." He set off with a 6-man unit. The skies darkened an hour after they entered the pass. None of them emerged. Days later, a shepherd boy found something at the edge of the valley. 7 helmets, arranged in a perfect circle, each turned upside down and filled with blood. Calla never looked back, but her prayers grew louder. She no longer whispered, she chanted, and the sky listened. Storms gathered when she walked. The earth trembled when she raised her arms, and a distant thrum like war drums in the belly of the mountains never stopped. In a village called Threnwool, she finally spoke to someone, an old woman with no eyes and too many scars. She called Calla by name. "I dreamed of your coming. The last vessel of Calgor." Calla nodded. "My blood remembers." The woman handed her a small blade, cracked, rusted and ancient. "This is all that remains of the god's first sword. It will awaken when the time is right." Calla took it, and for the first time she smiled. Because deep inside her bones, something stirred, like a battle cry waiting to erupt, like fire dreaming of a match. The world thought it had killed the old gods, but it forgot that some gods don't die. They wait, and they choose. And Calgor had chosen Calla. By now Calla's name traveled faster than flame. Whispers of her passed from mouth to mouth. She had walked through fire. She had called lightning with a cry. She had cursed an entire regiment with a single glance. None of it was confirmed. All of it was believed. Some feared her. Some worshipped her. Some wanted her dead. But one man wanted answers. His name was Elian Grimm, the Blood Prophet. A heretic scholar banished from the imperial libraries for translating forbidden war scriptures. He lived in a hollowed-out monastery near the shattered cliffs of Ravosk. It was there Calla came, guided by an instinct she didn't understand. Her blade still rusted, vibrated against her hip like it was humming. Elian opened the monastery door before she knocked. He had one arm, no eyes, and ink-stained fingers. "You've heard the drums too," he said. "They're not dreams, they're memories." Calla stepped inside without speaking. Books were scattered everywhere. Swords hung over doorways like blessings. The air smelled of dust, blood and ancient wax. "You're late," Elian said as he limped toward a worn table. "The prophecies said the vessel would arrive before the Empire awoke the hollow engines." Calla furrowed her brow. "What engines?" Elian sat. His single hand trembled as he opened a tome bound in what looked like old skin. "Machines forged in the last days of the War of Wills, built to consume faith, and bleed it into weaponry." Calla flinched. She had dreamed of such machines, towers of bone and steel drinking the screams of the faithful. She thought they were nightmares. "They're real," Elian whispered, "and the Empire is digging them out." He paused. "You must awaken Calgor fully before they activate the first one." Calla looked at the rusted blade. "It's still asleep." Elian smiled grimly. "Then it's time to wake it." He led her down into the monastery's crypt, deeper than she thought any building should go, down stone staircases that bled with old moss and ancient names. At the bottom stood a single door of obsidian. On it the same sigil burned faintly, the sword of Calgor. Calla touched it. It burned her palm but didn't push her back. Instead it welcomed her. The door creaked open. Inside was no treasure, no glowing altar, just a pool of black liquid surrounded by bones arranged in reverence. "This is the waking pit," Elian said. "Your blade must drink from it, and you must give something in return." Calla didn't hesitate. She knelt, dipped the blade into the thick liquid. It hissed, screamed. and glowed red for the first time. Then she raised her palm and sliced it open. Blood dripped into the pool. The bones shook. A low inhuman hum began to vibrate through the walls. The pool pulsed once, twice, then exploded into a pillar of red fire. Elian cried out. He collapsed, whispering, "He is waking. He sees you." Cala's eyes burned. Her skin cracked with glowing lines. Her voice split into 3 tones as she spoke. "I am the vessel. I am the wrath. And I remember." When the fire faded, her blade was no longer rusted. It shone with a dark crimson edge. It whispered battle hymns in her mind. Cala looked down at Elian. He was bleeding from the ears, smiling. "You are ready now," he whispered. "They will come for you." Cala turned. Her voice was deeper now. "Let them." And as she climbed out of the crypt, the bells of the forgotten monastery rang for the first time in 300 years. General Voss had heard enough. The council chambers stank of fear masked as strategy. Prophets, deserters, even priests had gone silent in the last 3 weeks. Whispers of Kalgor, once buried under ridicule, were returning. With fire, with blood, and with the name of a girl. Cala. He stood at the war map, eyes hard. "This is no god," he spat. "This is manipulation. A weaponized myth." Around him, commanders shifted nervously. Some had lost entire units in the field. Others had seen the sigil. Some swore they'd heard chanting on open comms, chanting that turned their men against each other. "Then what do you propose?" asked Commander Reese. Voss smiled coldly. "We don't chase ghosts. We send something that doesn't believe in them." He activated the display. A figure appeared, draped in black alloy armor. No insignia. No visible face, just a codename etched in red at the bottom: Saber 9, Empire's Blade. Someone gasped. Voss nodded. "Our last resort." He doesn't pray, he doesn't feel, he only obeys. Far beneath the capital, Saber 9 was removed from cryostasis. He didn't speak, he only opened his eyes, flat, white, soulless, and waited. The scientist prepped his neural link, uploaded every report on Cala. Every image, every pattern of movement. Then they gave him one command: eliminate the vessel. Meanwhile, Cala had begun to change. Not just her eyes, not just her strength, but her very aura. Birds stopped singing when she passed. The ground shivered when she knelt. And her blade, Kalgor's fang, grew warm during dreams. She had visions now, of wars long past, of gods with burning eyes and hollow mouths, of Kalgor on a throne of spears. She remembered battles she had never fought, pain she had never lived, and victories soaked in too much blood. She didn't ask for this power, but she knew she had to wield it, because something darker was coming, something mechanical, something cold. Saber 9 tracked her for 9 days through mountain ash and blighted trees. He didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't stop. He found the monastery, burned it to the ground. The bones in the crypt screamed when he stepped through, but he ignored them. Then he found the trail, crimson soil, deep footprints glowing faintly with godlight. He accelerated. No soldiers, no backup, just his command, just his target. On the 12th night he saw her, standing in the center of a ruined battlefield. Crows circled overhead, flame flickered around her feet. Cala turned. She didn't speak, but her blade hummed, and the air thickened. Saber 9 scanned her. Vital signs, elevated. Spiritual resonance off the charts. Probability of resistance, 94%. He drew his plasma blade. It whispered static, and then they moved. Metal against myth, speed against soul. The earth cracked. The sky bled light. They fought for hours. No words, only fury. But something happened. Each time Saber 9 struck her, she got faster. Each time he dodged her blade, her aura burned brighter. His neural systems flickered. His sensors distorted. He began to see things: a throne, a battlefield, a girl on fire surrounded by ancient warriors screaming her name. His hand shook. Cala looked into his helmet, and said, quietly, "You are just a weapon. I am the war." Then her blade pierced the ground, and the battlefield exploded in light. When it cleared, Saber 9 lay still, his systems fried, his armor cracked, And in the visor reflection, Kalgor stood behind her. Not a myth, not a story. A god, alive, and angry. The battlefield was silent. Ash floated like snow. Crows perched on the dead machines, their eyes glowing red. Saber 9 no longer moved. The Empire's greatest weapon broken, not by force alone, but by memory. Kala stood over him, breath steaming in the dawn air. Her blade pulsed, not with fire but with a heartbeat. Kalgor's heartbeat. The god stood behind her, half shadow, half flame, towering, faceless, wrapped in spectral armor that shimmered like war banners soaked in blood. He didn't speak, he remembered, and when gods remember, the world shakes. Kala turned, eyes glowing. You remember now, she said. I saw it in your fire. Kalgor nodded, and the ground split beneath his feet. All my temples razed, all my followers slaughtered, all my banners buried in silence. Kala reached into her satchel and pulled out a small burnt medallion. The last emblem of Kalgor's old church. She had found it in her mother's ashes. I've carried your name longer than I've carried mine, she whispered. And now the Empire wants to erase it again. Kalgor's hand extended. He took the medallion gently, then crushed it in his palm. The dust flared into flames. My worship is no longer quiet, he said. My war begins again. The sky dimmed. The winds shifted. In the west cities trembled, though no army marched. Kala felt it in her blood. A call, a drumbeat. Not just to survive, but to rise. But she was no longer alone. The destruction of Saber 9 sent a shock through the Empire. General Voss stared at the data in disbelief. No signal, no vitals, no trace of metal. Just one image returned before the blackout. A flaming sword hovering over a girl's head. They've awakened it, he muttered. The god of war walks again. In a hidden cathedral beneath the capital, a woman in a gold veil knelt before a sealed gate. The prophecy begins, she whispered. She was the last living priestess of the Hollow Order, the one who'd betrayed Kalgor a century ago. And now she felt his rage returning, not as a myth, but as a reckoning. Back in the ruins, Kala sat by the wreckage of Saber 9. She placed her hand on the husk of his chest, and felt something, a memory. Not hers, not the machines. Kalgor, a war long ago, when humans used gods like weapons, when they built machines to steal divine power, and when Kalgor's own blade was turned against him. Kala pulled her hand back. She looked at her blade, Kalgor's fang. It pulsed with vengeance, but she frowned. Vengeance isn't enough, she said. Kalgor turned to her. You would temper wrath. I would wield it, she replied. But not blindly. If we destroy everything, we become the Empire. The god studied her, and for the first time he bowed. You lead, I follow. In the distance, war horns blared. Imperial soldiers began to gather at the edge of the Deadlands, marching not with fear, but with the hollow engines. They had awakened the machines of old, fueled not by oil or fire, but by stolen faith, faith drained from conquered peoples, faith inverted and corrupted. Kala rose, her silhouette cast in red light, and she spoke not just as a vessel, but as a war priestess. We won't let them steal belief again. Kalgor raised his sword, and for the first time in centuries, the war god roared. It was not a sound, it was an earthquake, a wildfire, a promise. War was no longer the Empire's to command. They didn't move like machines. They moved like beasts starved of light. Clawed arms dragged trenches into the dirt. Their heads turned slowly, as if sniffing for hope. The hollow engines had awakened, 5 of them, each towering over the trees, plated in bone-colored alloy, and scrawled with ancient circuitry. Their cores pulsed not with energy, but with stolen belief, siphoned from the hearts of conquered tribes, drained from ruined temples, harvested from children forced to kneel before flags. General Voss stood in the control center beneath Citadel Vane. He watched the readings climb. Faith levels stable, the technician reported. The engines are responding. Voss smiled grimly. They'll tear that girl and her god apart. Back on the outer ridges, Kala saw the smoke first. Thick, black, carrying the scent of burning sanctuaries. Kalgor tasted it in the wind. They feed off what once belonged to us. Kala's grip tightened on her blade. They built gods out of suffering. She and Kalgor traveled toward the dead spine, the ancient ridge where the empire buried its secrets. With every step, Kala felt the ground grow colder, not from nature, but from emptiness. The hollow engines had hollowed the land. They consumed belief and exhaled despair. When they reached the first ridge, they saw it. A massive construct, its chest glowing faint blue, a face made of glass and wire, and a voice female soft weaponized. "You are trespassing on sovereign imperial ground," it echoed. "State your designation." Kala stepped forward. "I am Kala, daughter of Ash, priestess of Kalgor, and I don't ask permission to exist." The engine's eyes flared. Target identified. Exterminate. It lunged, faster than she expected. Kalgor moved to shield her, but she didn't flinch. She met the strike with Kalgor's fang. The blade screamed. The engine staggered, its outer shell cracked, and from the crack, a voice cried out. A human voice. Kala's eyes widened. "There's someone inside," Kalgor growled. "They bind the faithful to power it." Live fuel. Kala moved differently now. Not to destroy, to free. She ducked under the engine's next swipe, and plunged her blade into its leg. The god light surged through the construct, circuits fried. The cry inside grew louder. With a battle scream, she climbed the engine's back, drove her blade into its central port, and whispered, "Let go." The engine convulsed, then exploded into blinding light. When it cleared, the machine was nothing but a pile of scorched steel, and from the wreckage a boy emerged. No older than 10 feet, his eyes wide with terror and recognition. You're her," he said. "The girl from the dreams." Kala knelt, took his trembling hands. "What's your name?" "Kavrin." He pointed to his chest. "They put the needle in here. They said my faith would power the empire." Kalgor loomed behind them, his voice deep and mournful. "They feed off stolen worship. This war is no longer between gods and men. It's between belief and its corruption." More engines approached, each carrying another bound soul within. Kalgor drew his sword, flame rippling along its edge. But Kala shook her head. "No more death for the sake of it. We don't just destroy them. We break the system. We set the bound free." Kalgor narrowed his eyes. "You would show mercy in the face of machines. I would show mercy to what remains human inside them." The god studied her. Then slowly he lowered his sword. The boy Kavrin clutched her arm. "There are more, hundreds like me, trapped inside." Kala looked at the line of hollow engines stretching across the horizon, each one humming with the stolen faith of the forgotten. Her voice was steady. "Then we free them all." They called themselves fuel. Not soldiers, not civilians. Fuel. Children taken from razed temples and outlawed shrines, hooked into machines that turned belief into weaponry. Each one had a story. None were allowed to finish it. Until Kala. After destroying the first hollow engine, she moved swiftly. Kalgor at her back, Kavrin guiding her through bloodied maps and whispering ruins. They struck at night, quick, precise, no war cries, only silence followed by freedom. 3 more engines fell in 5 days, not exploded, not annihilated, deactivated. Kala learned the resonance between her blade and the engine cores. She could sever the god chains, cut the binding faith, free the children. Each engine released 1, sometimes 2. Their ages ranged from 5 to 15. Their eyes were all the same, empty, until they saw her. They called her the Flame Speaker. Others called her Mother of Sparks. But the name that stayed was given by a girl who couldn't speak. She knelt before Kala, took ash from the earth, and drew the symbol of Kalgor beside her own name. The others followed, dozens of them, then hundreds. Kala had never asked to be followed, but the children of Ash marched behind her. Some could channel love. Some heard the battlefield before it happened. Some simply stood tall, refusing to bow to fear again. Kalgor watched them in silence. This was not how gods waged war, but this was how she waged it. "You are building an army," he said one night. "No,"
Kala replied. I'm rebuilding a people. Meanwhile the empire seethed. General Voss saw his machines fall like dominoes. Faith levels were dropping. Weapons malfunctioned. Entire outposts went dark. Heretics, he snarled. Barefoot heretics bringing down the pillars of order. He ordered Phase Theta, the unsealing of Vault 9. The final project of the original war, the one even the architects refused to name. Activate the Red Choir, Voss commanded. Deep in the Empire's vaults, coffins opened. Inside were not soldiers, but children, modified, erased, taught only one thing, kill Faith. Back on the outskirts of a fallen stronghold, Kala held council. Her followers were gathering, old priests with burned tongues, women with chains still dragging from their wrists, boys who had never spoken aloud before she touched their hands. They lit fires in a perfect circle. Kalgor stood at the center, a silent god, remembering his own people, lost to time and steel. Kala raised Kalgor's fang. Its glow lit every face. We were never meant to survive, she said. But we did, and now we do more than survive. We take back what they stole. The children shouted her name, not in frenzy, in reverence. But that same night Kavrin saw something in the flames. A vision, a sound, a song, high-pitched, wrong. He collapsed screaming. Kala rushed to him. What is it? The choir, he gasped. They're coming. They don't bleed. They don't dream. They only sing. Kalgor's flame shivered. Even gods feared what slept in Vault 9. Kala helped Kavrin up, her face carved in stone. Then we silenced the song. The night didn't fall gently. It was ripped from the sky by sound. Not thunder, not wind, not screams. A song, high and pure, beautiful in the way. Fire is beautiful right before it burns you alive. Kala froze. Even Kalgor paused. The children of Ash looked skyward, hands over ears. The Red Choir had arrived. Not by air, not by road. They appeared, stepping from flame like echoes wearing flesh. Children, hair like silver wires, eyes like polished glass, smiles frozen into crescents of perfect harmony. They sang. Their mouths opened wide, and those who heard too closely bled from the ears. Some dropped to their knees. Others screamed names they hadn't spoken in years. Kala stood her ground. Her fingers clenched Kalgor's fang. They are not alive, Kalgor said. They were built to destroy what you are. Kala didn't flinch. We destroy them anyway. Kaldrain lay behind her, whispering protective lines from a forgotten prayer. The children formed a half circle. Their powers flickered under the pressure of the choir's song. But Kala moved forward. One step, two, until she stood face to face with the nearest singer. A boy no older than 10. His chest glowed with artificial heat. A rune was etched above his heart. Kala, 11. Kala's voice dropped into her throat. What do you believe in? She asked. The boy smiled wider. His jaw cracked, and then he screamed, not with his voice, but with his whole body. The sound knocked her backward, but Kalgor caught her. Flames exploded from his hands, not outward, but downward. The earth split open, and from it came the drums. Old war drums from the time when gods fought on dirt instead of paper. Kalgor's beat rose against the choir's song. Two faiths, two frequencies, two armies of children, one forged by love, the other by mutilation. Kala rose, her lips bled, her ears rang, but she did not waver. She moved between the choir, ducking, slashing, severing the circuits behind their ears. One fell, then another, but there were too many. The children of Ash could barely hold the line. They weren't trained, they weren't soldiers, but they had something else. They had names, memories, faith that bled and burned but never broke. One child, Suri, lit her fists on fire. Another rose, wrapped the choir's legs in chains he'd once been imprisoned by. A third screamed so loudly it distorted the enemy's song. Kalgor's power surged. The god grew tall behind Kala. His flaming armor now crackled with her rage. His war cry shook the trees loose from their roots. The choir began to falter. One by one, their melodies cracked. Dissonance, static. They weren't built for chaos. General Voss watched from a mirror in the capital. His hands shook. Impossible, he whispered. An aide ran in. Their frequency's been scrambled, sir. The god he's adapting. Voss bared his teeth. Then send the last one. In the field, the children of Ash began to hope. Kala pierced the chest of the ninth singer. The battlefield quieted, but then they heard it. Not a song, a hum, low, vibrating, wrong. A figure stepped out of the fog, taller than the others, wrapped in black metal. A girl, or what had once been one. Kala 00, read the mark on her forehead. The prototype. Kala felt the temperature drop. Even Kalgor's flame dimmed. The girl did not speak. She opened her mouth, and instead of song, a scream of pure belief came out. It wasn't hers. It was Kala's. Her memories, her rituals, her pain, everything she had ever believed weaponized and reflected back. Kala staggered. The choir had learned. They now fought with her own religion, and in the rising heat of a collapsing sky, she knew, if she didn't end this now, her faith would destroy her people.
Kala dropped to one knee. Not out of weakness. Out of necessity. She had to breathe. The scream from Core 00 hadn't just struck her ears. It had gone deeper. Through marrow. Through memory. Through belief. She heard her mother's voice. The prayers whispered at dusk. The smell of blood and burnt sage. She saw her father's body, torn open during a raid. She had lit the fire herself, because the old rite said only daughters could return warriors to flame. All of it. Her entire truth reflected back as ammunition. Core 00 advanced. The red light in her chest blinked like a war drum. A living archive of stolen faith. She opened her mouth again. This time she didn't scream. She recited, word for word, line for line, Kala's most sacred chants, twisted, butchered, then broadcast through a metallic throat. Kalgor howled, not out of pain, out of fury. She recites my gospel, the god roared. But she has no flame of her own. Still, even he staggered. The war god could not burn what had already been hollowed. He needed a vessel. Kala rose. Her limbs trembled, but her grip tightened. She reached back, toward the fang. Kalgor's fang. It pulsed once, twice, then it spoke. Say your name. Kala blinked. The world was falling apart. The sky had cracked like glass, and a choir of stolen children stood ready to erase her with her own past. But still she obeyed. I am Kala Vey. The blade flared white. Not red, not orange, but something older. White flame. The color of grief just before it hardens into war. Core 00 stepped forward. The choir followed. Every one of them opened their mouths. But this time Kala spoke first, not to them. To the blade. She told it everything. Every name she'd buried. Every rite she'd twisted to survive. Every moment she doubted the god inside her. She told the blade what they never asked. Will you kill for belief, even if it means killing what you believed in? The fang shook in her hands. Then it wept. Not in sound. In memory. It poured fire through her. Not to destroy. To awaken. Kalgor rose taller, now fully formed. His horns stretched beyond the clouds. His shadow eclipsed even the metal stars launched by the syndicate. The choir faltered. Core 00 did not. She raised her arms. Ritual runes lit across her chest. From her back, 2 wings of light snapped open, each one lined with symbols stolen from Kala's people. Enough, Kala said. And she ran. Straight into her own past. Straight toward the godless girl who dared to wear her faith like armor. Their blades met. Not once. Not twice. But in 1,000 echoes. Each strike was a question. Each block a refusal. Around them the battlefield quieted. The other choir units stopped singing. The children of Ash simply watched. It wasn't just a duel. It was doctrine versus devotion. Core 00 moved with perfect speed. Calculated efficiency. She had learned every move from the god of war's stolen history. But Kala moved with something else. Flaw. grit, emotion, and that made her unpredictable, uncontainable, divine. A cut, a dodge, a parry. Then Kala dropped her blade. Core 00 raised hers to finish it. And that's when Kala whispered the true name of Kalgor. Not the one passed down, not the one printed in the blood psalms, but the first name. The one whispered between gods before the stars were born. Kalgor heard it, and the god wept. His tear white hot fell from the heavens and struck the battlefield like a meteor. It consumed Core 00, not with fire, but with truth. She screamed not in attack, but in realization. Her stolen faith unraveled. Her body shook, and she collapsed, whispering the names of all the children she'd been forced to forget. Kala stepped back. Blood ran down her arms, but her hands no longer shook. The choir was silent. The fang dimmed, and Kalgor's shadow faded into the stars. One battle was over, but the war for meaning had just begun. The battlefield still smoked. But Kala didn't look at the ashes. She looked at the silence, at the faces of the choir, at the bloodied sky, waiting for someone to rewrite its rules. Core 00 lay crumpled, her wings gone, her body twitching like a machine trying to remember it was once human. Kala approached slowly, blade down, voice calm. "Do you remember your name?" she asked. Core 00 blinked, twitched, then whispered, "Not all of it." Kala reached into her tunic, pulled out a piece of singed parchment, burned around the edges, but still legible. A child's list. Dozens of names, scrawled in trembling ink, some crossed out, some circled, all once sung in prayer. It was a page from the book of burned names, passed down from the earliest flame keepers. A list of every soul taken by conquest, fire, or silence. Kala handed it to Core 00. "You were one of us," she said. Core 00 stared at it, touched a name with a shaking finger, then another, then froze. "My name was." The rest was lost to tears, but not forgotten. Kala turned to the others, the choir, the children of Ash, the ones who had once mocked her chants, burned her temples, laughed at her blood-stained robes. "You stole our fire," Kala said, voice rising, "but you never learned how to carry it." Behind her Kalgor stirred in the shadows, no longer giant, no longer screaming, just watching, measuring, waiting. The children began to murmur. Some stepped back, some dropped their weapons, others fell to their knees, not from guilt, but from the sudden awareness of loss, loss of memory, of meaning, of the voices they'd buried just to belong. One stepped forward. She couldn't have been older than 15. A war orphan. Buster Wars bore the mark of yours bore the mark of Teen. Her hands trembled as she raised a single question. What happens now? Kala looked at her, saw herself, years ago, back when she was the one asking gods for answers. "You choose," Kala said. "Not for me, not for Kalgor, not even for the ancestors, but for you." A gust of wind blew across the field. The book of burned names fluttered open. Pages turned like whispers. Some of the names began to glow, softly, one by one. The child stared, then dropped to her knees, not in submission, in recognition, and began to recite, name by name, voice cracking with every syllable. The others followed. Kala didn't stop them, didn't lead, didn't correct their pronunciations, because this wasn't about performance. It was about remembrance. Kalgor knelt beside her, now no taller than a man. His eyes glowed with something ancient, pride, grief. Even gods don't always know the difference. He whispered, "They're rebuilding the altar." Kala didn't answer. She was too busy holding the parchment, watching as more names lit up, not in flame, but in light. The choir was no longer a weapon. It was becoming a chorus. And the battlefield, a temple. But not everyone agreed. A figure stepped forward from the hills. riding a beast made of bone and steam, armor stitched with teeth, eyes like obsidian glass, Commander Varnick, High Warden of the Purity Mandate, and the one who had personally signed the order to burn Kala's village, 15 years ago. He surveyed the scene, the fallen choir, the silent soldiers, the book of burned names, then spat. So the heretic thinks she's a priestess again. Kala rose, face calm, but her hand tightened on the fang. I never stopped. Varnick dismounted, drew a blade longer than her torso. The wind changed. Even the glowing names dimmed. Because Varnick didn't believe in gods. He believed in systems. And systems, unlike gods, had no patience for memory. You desecrate the battlefield, he said. Kala stood tall. I consecrate it. Behind her the others formed a circle, not to fight, to witness. Because what was about to happen wasn't war. It was judgment. Varnick attacked first, faster than expected. A blur of rage and protocol. Kala blocked the first strike, dodged the second, slid beneath the third, then whispered a name. One not in the book, but in her bones. Her mother's name. Kalgor roared. The sky cracked, and the fang erupted in flame. Varnick swung wildly. Each blow thundered with law. But Kala's blade hummed with something more powerful. Grief made holy. Their blades clashed. Box fell like ash. Until finally she stepped inside his guard, pressed the fang to his chest, and whispered, "This field remembers." Then drove it home. Varnick fell, not with a scream, but with silence. A silence that spread, and turned sacred. The battle was done, but the war for memory had only begun. They tried to bury her god. They buried her prayers, her chants, her entire temple. But they didn't realize. The temple was never a place, it was people. And now it was rising again, stone by stone, scar by scar. Kala stood on the battlefield turned sanctuary. Where blood once flowed, now ash was being cleared. Where screams echoed, new songs hummed. The surviving choir members, once weapons of conversion, now labored beside the war orphans they were meant to erase. Together they rebuilt, not just walls, but memory. Kala moved through the grounds, barefoot, unarmed, unguarded. She was not afraid. Kalgor followed a few paces behind, smaller now, a presence more than a force, no longer a weapon of wrath, but a reminder of why wrath was once necessary. Do they know what they're building? He asked. Kala nodded. They don't have to know the old designs. Box. They just need to know who they're building for. Children carve stones with names, not of saints, but of the forgotten. Each block a tomb and a song, each name a hymn. A small girl tugged on Kala's robe. Her hands were calloused, her face smudged, but her eyes were wide with purpose. What do we call it? She asked. Kala paused, looked around. At the patchwork stone, the bones of broken idols turned into altars. The fang now sheathed in the heart of the square like a flag. She smiled. We call it the Temple of Wounds. The girl blinked. Why wounds? Kala knelt beside her, took her hand, pressed it to her own chest. Because nothing sacred ever starts unscarred. Box. Word spread quickly. Some mocked the name. Others wept at it, but none denied it. The Temple of Wounds began to draw wanderers. Box. Soldiers. Abandoned orphans. Defectors from purity camps. Even former high priests who had lost their faith when the choir turned on its own. They didn't come for salvation. They came for silence. The kind that listened, not erased. One night, by the fire, a boy approached Kala with a scroll. It was sealed with the sigil of the Purity Mandate, burned at the edges. She opened it carefully, read the first lines aloud. To the heretic of the Red Plains, you are hereby summoned to stand trial at the citadel of Sanctus, where you shall answer for your crimes, against the holy doctrine. Kalgor growled behind her, but Kala just smiled.
I was wondering when they'd remember I was still alive. Oh. The child beside her looked worried. They'll come for you again, Kala added. Probably. The child frowned. But we just built the temple. Kala placed a hand on his shoulder. Then they'll learn. Some temples fight back. At dawn messengers were sent, not to plead for protection, but to invite witnesses. All who remembered the names. All who had once been told their God was unworthy. All who had been beaten, silenced, mocked for what they loved. Kala wasn't marching alone. She would walk into that citadel of Sanctus, with hundreds behind her. Not warriors, not zealous, but survivors. Each bearing scars turned sacred. As they prepared to leave, Kala returned to the altar in the center of the temple. She unsheathed the fang, held it to the sky, not as a weapon, but as a torch. The flames curled upward, slow, and lighting the etched names on every wall around her. Kalgor whispered, "Are you sure you're ready?" Kala looked down at her hands, no longer blood-stained, but steady, firm, scarred. Yes. They mocked my faith. They burned my gods. They laughed at my prayers. But now they'll see. I don't pray for mercy. I worship the God of war. The sky didn't answer. It didn't need to. The people behind her did. And their silence thundered louder than any chant. Kala turned toward the horizon, toward the citadel that had once sentenced her to exile. The road was long, but she didn't walk it alone. Every step forward was a step reclaimed. Every footfall a hymn. Every breath a defiance. Because some temples are built from faith, and others from fire.
The ash in the wind wasn't from fire, it was from memory. The kind that clings to skin long after the wounds have closed. Kala walked through the streets of Sanctus not as a warrior, not even as a priestess, but as a reckoning. Kalagor followed her like a shadow reborn, no longer hidden in myth. Children who once had no name walked in formation behind her, silent, but seen. Citizens stepped aside, unsure if they were witnessing a savior or a storm. Perhaps both. A young boy dropped his prayer beads as she passed. Kala picked them up. They were carved with the insignia of the mandate. She held them gently, then whispered, "He will no longer answer you," and dropped them into the fountain. The water hissed, the beads melted, and in their place rose steam shaped like wings. Some say they heard a whisper in that mist. A name not spoken in a century. Kalagor. The god of war, not destruction, not chaos, but memory armed. The tribunal's collapse spread faster than plague. Towers emptied, scrolls burned either by the people or by priests, too ashamed to keep their false gospels. Temples once draped in white were painted with symbols older than the mandate itself. The red spiral of Kala's origin. The sigil of scars. In the market square the execution platform stood empty. Kala stepped onto it, not to punish, but to speak. She raised her hand. The crowd quieted instantly. "I will not lead you. I will not be your queen. I am not your redemption. I am your mirror. And your memory." She paused, looked at the children gathered around her. Then the elders. Then the soldiers who once guarded this square with drawn blades. "You abandoned your gods for comfort, and in doing so you buried your strength. I did not survive to punish you. I returned to wake you." Kalagor growled behind her. The sound was not a threat. It was a hymn. Low, ancient. The ground beneath the city cracked, not from ruin, but from release. Roots long buried clawed their way upward through stone. Shrines forgotten in the catacombs bloomed with violet fire. Statues whispered their own names again. The gods were remembering. Kala stepped down from the platform, walked through the crowd. People reached for her, not to worship, but to touch the proof that she was real. That what they had feared had returned, not as vengeance but as justice. She entered the old temple at dusk. The doors had been sealed for generations. She raised her hand, and they opened, not with force, but with recognition. Inside, the dust shimmered. Pews rotted by time leaned forward, like penitent witnesses. She stepped to the altar, placed a blade upon it. It was not hers. It had belonged to her first teacher, a priest who died whispering truths the mandate had outlawed. Calla lit the incense. It burned crimson. Caligor stood beside her. His voice was not thunder this time, but breath. I remember them. Calla nodded. So will they. Outside, the city knelt, not to her, but to what they had forgotten. The old faiths, the forgotten songs, the war not of blades, but of silence broken. Calla turned from the altar. She spoke the final vow. I do not need to be worshipped, only remembered. And so do they. One by one the people outside whispered names, lost friends, fallen family, burned temples, banned prayers. The gods heard them. All of them. And Caligor, the once banished god of war, wept. It didn't begin with swords. And it didn't end with them either. The final war wasn't fought in blood, but in stories. In truths once buried so deep, entire generations forgot how to speak them. But Calla remembered, and she taught others how to remember too. The children who had been rescued from the dust, those who had nothing but nightmares, began to sing. Their voices echoed through Sanctus like lullabies, and war chants braided into one. Caligor stood above them on the temple's highest balcony. Eyes of fire, heart of memory. He wasn't there, it was that he was there to remind. The mandate's final stronghold, a gray fortress etched into the cliffs of North Sanctum, sent word. They did not beg for peace. They demanded Calla's surrender. Her silence, her exile. She did not send a reply. Instead she walked, with bare feet, through the riverbed of bones, past the valley where her mother's voice still haunted the stones, and toward the cliffs that had once echoed with her screams. This time she brought no army, only truth. One by one the people of Sanctus followed her, not with weapons, but with stories carved into wooden planks, painted on fabric, and inked into their own skin. They marched in silence, letting the noise of memory rise like thunder. The fortress gates were not guarded. They were abandoned. Those who had stayed inside had turned their blades upon themselves, afraid of what they had once defended. Ash marked the walls. But it was not from fire. It was from guilt. Calla stepped into the high hall of Darkon, the same room where she had once been whipped for praying in her mother's tongue. The stone table was still there. The chair of judgment still dripping with wax from candles long melted. She placed her hand on the cold marble, then turned to the crowd behind her. This is where they silenced us. She raised her voice. But silence is no longer sacred. It is our enemy. Behind her, Caligor entered. No one saw him pass through the gates. He was just there, as if he had always been. A low rumble echoed through the cliffs. The stone beneath the fortress cracked, not violently, but gently, like a tomb being opened after too many years shut. Calla placed her other hand over her heart. I release you, she whispered, to the gods who remember, to the world that forgot. The fortress began to collapse, not from fire, not from war, but from weight. The weight of centuries of lies disintegrating under the truth. As the walls crumbled, a tree grew from the center of the hall. Its bark was the color of dried blood. Its leaves shimmered like tears, and on each branch grew sigils, each one a memory, a name, a lost god. Caligor spoke. The war ends not when enemies fall, but when memory rises. Calla looked out over the cliffs. The wind carried prayers not spoken in hundreds of years. They drifted like feathers, like weapons unneeded, like peace finally earned. She closed her eyes. In the silence she heard her mother's voice again, not in pain, but in song. It was done. The war had ended in memory. The temple was no longer made of stone. It had become something else, something alive. Its walls breathed with memory. Its floor pulsed with names too sacred to be forgotten. And at its center stood Calla, not as a priestess, not as a soldier, but as the living flame of a god long erased. Children now played in the gardens, where corpses once lay. Their laughter replaced the sound of screams. The wind carried not dust but petals, each one carved with symbols of the old ways. The world had not healed overnight. There were still scars, still empty chairs at dinner tables, still mothers who stared too long at the sky, waiting. But the silence was no longer suffocating. It was sacred, a space where truth had room to breathe. Caligor no longer needed to stand guard. His sword was hung above the threshold, wrapped in silk, a relic, a warning, a memory. Cala's days were spent with the people. She listened more than she spoke. She planted seeds in the soil with her bare hands. Not just flowers, but herbs her mother once used to heal wounds, physical and spiritual. Every night she lit one candle in the temple, not to the god of war, but to the one who remembered him. Pilgrims came from distant villages, from cities once ruled by mandate law. Some came in shame, some in hope. All left changed. One boy no older than 10 approached Cala during evening prayers. He held out a torn banner, once a mandate flag. He had scribbled over it with charcoal and paint, made it into something new. It now bore the symbol of Caligor's blade, wrapped in vines. Cala knelt before him. She didn't speak. She only touched the banner and bowed her head. The boy whispered, "Is it true you died once?" Cala smiled gently, "More than once. And each time I came back with more fire." He looked at her in awe. "Are you a god?" She shook her head. "No, I'm the daughter of one. But more importantly," she placed her hand over the boy's heart, "I'm proof they never truly left us." That night, as stars painted the sky, Cala stood atop the rebuilt temple. Behind her the people sang. They didn't sing hymns of conquest or vengeance. They sang lullabies in forgotten tongues, songs that braided peace and pain, hope and history, grief and grace. Caligor appeared beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence said enough. She looked to the horizon. Smoke from distant villages no longer meant burning. It meant harvest, warmth, a new season. "I used to think war would be my end," she said softly. "But it was only the beginning." Caligor nodded. "War doesn't choose who worships it. But peace must be earned." She turned to him. "And we did. We earned." Below them, children danced in circles of candlelight. Elders whispered stories once banned. Drums beat not to summon violence, but to call joy home. Cala raised her arms to the sky, spoke the words her mother once taught her, words forbidden for generations, words that returned like thunder. "I am not your broken thing. I am not your silence. I am not your shame. I am the voice of the forgotten God. And I will never kneel again." The people echoed her. Together, a chorus of those once erased. The stars shimmered above. The god of war, wherever he now watched from, did not roar. He did not demand blood. He only listened. As his daughter lit the world on fire, not with war, but with truth. Cala no longer dreamed of fire. She dreamed of rivers, of hands held, of a future not shaped by battle cries, but by shared meals and laughter. The world did not change because she destroyed it. It changed because she survived it, and dared to rebuild from ash without hate in her hands. Years had passed since the fall of the mandate, yet whispers of the old regime still lingered in shadows. They wore new uniforms, spoke of order and peace, but their eyes could not hide the fear, because they remembered what Cala had done. They remembered what she had become. Not just a rebel, not just a myth, but proof. Proof that belief could never be erased, that the soul cannot be shackled forever, that even gods left buried could rise, through those who remembered them. Cala traveled now, not as a warrior, not as a preacher, but as a witness. She carried no sword, only a staff carved from the elder wood of the first grove. Its surface bore the names of every fallen believer she once fought beside. She touched each name every morning, and whispered thanks. One village at a time, she listened. She didn't speak of Caligor unless asked. She didn't summon fire unless it was needed. Most of the time, she offered silence, because sometimes silence was the loudest form of truth. At the border of the old Mandate capital, she found the last shrine, forgotten, overgrown. Its roof had collapsed, vines claiming what once was sacred. But the symbol remained, faded, cracked, but still there. The sigil of Caligor's flame, etched in stone. Calla knelt before it. No crowd, no ceremony, just her and the wind, and the memory of her mother's voice. She lit a single candle, held it to the cracked symbol. The flame flickered once, then surged upward. A brilliant white blue, hot, not with destruction, but memory. Every petal from nearby flowers turned toward it. Every tree hushed. Even the birds paused their song. Then a whisper, barely audible, echoed in her ear. Not in a voice, but in knowing. A presence. Caligor. Not demanding, not roaring, but watching. Proud. Whole, 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 whole. Calla smiled through tears. Not of pain, but peace. She pressed her forehead to the stone. I remember, she whispered. And I will make sure they do too. Behind her a young girl emerged from the trees. Barefoot, eyes wide with wonder. In her hand a small clay token, marked with the old symbol. I found this, the girl said. Is it real? Calla stood slowly, took the token gently, held it to her heart. It's real because you found it. The girl stepped closer. Can you teach me? Calla looked down at her wide eyes, at the dirt under her nails, at the fire, not in her hands, but in her spirit. The kind of fire not made for burning, but for lighting the path. Calla nodded. Yes, but not just me. She turned from the trees. Others appeared. Women, men, children, survivors, skeptics, dreamers. They came not to follow, but to remember, to rebuild, to write their own hymns, not of war, but of what comes after it. Calla handed the staff to the girl. You carry it now. The girl's hands trembled. It's heavy. Calla smiled. Yes, but you don't carry it alone. The people knelt, not in worship, but in reverence, to the past, to each other, to the ones they lost, to the ones still coming. The flame behind Calla burned brighter, not a weapon, a beacon, a promise. That no matter how many times they mocked her, no matter how many temples they crushed, no matter how many names they tried to erase, they would never again forget. The woman who worshipped the god of war, and taught the world how to survive him. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.